Whenever I close my eyes, pictures keep coming in my mind. Dark ones, cruel ones, scaring ones. I just can't stop these horrible memories. It's dark outside, I'm lying in my bed, trying to sleep, but my mind is not resting. Everything started when I was just an innocent little child. I was living with my parents in a rural village. We had a large family and were living in a house with my grandparents, my aunts and my 4 sisters, as well as my 2 girl cousins. My uncle used to live with us, but he went to Delhi to be an employee at a big company with a higher salary. Each month he sent us money so we could afford a proper livelihood. Since he left our family, I have been missing him every day. My parents are farmers. We had 2 cows, 4 buffaloes, 5 goats, and an acre of agricultural land. The animals used to live in our house, but since my uncle was sending us money, we could afford a proper shed for the animals. Shortly after my uncle left, my dad received a similar offer to go to India. Even though he wanted to go, he had to stay because he was the only man left in our family. My sisters, my cousins, and I had to help my mother in the household. We also had to take care of daily duties like looking after the animals, preparing food, and fetching water from the public tap. To get the water was my task. I had to walk for 30 minutes every day. There was no street. Instead, I had to make my way through rice fields and steep walkways. Back then, I used to think these were the hardest days and I wished to get out of there every day. Since I was a little child, I always wanted to get an education and move to an urban area because no one in my family was educated. If I think back now, I can see that I was totally wrong. I can hardly remember what my family's house looked like. Even their faces, their voices, and their laughs have been vanished out of my mind, as well as the name my parents gave me. If I would have known that, I would have never left them. The day I met him started like every other day. I got up with the sunrise. Outside my window, the birds were singing, and our animals were already awake and saluting me loudly. I was on my way to the shed to feed the animals. The rule was the first one awake should feed the animals. The animals were the only means of earning our livelihood, so that's why they were the first priority. On my way, I saw my father already being up and taking care of the duty. Rather than bothering him, I decided to get the water because we would need it for breakfast. As always, I was walking through the rice fields, whistling my favorite song and feeling the upcoming warmth of the sun on my skin. I couldn't help but smile. It seemed to be a great day. Again, I was wrong. When I arrived to the public water tap, there were already many people from our village. They were standing in line to get water, talking to each other. As every day they were the same people. They never changed, so everyone was familiar to me. I had to go to the end of the queue and wait for my turn. After waiting for half an hour in the sun, I finally got the water I was desperately waiting for. I said goodbye, thinking that I would see them the next day again, without knowing that this would be our last meeting. I was lifting the heavy water canisters when suddenly a man was standing next to me. He was asking whether I needed help carrying the water. At first sight, I was frightened because I didn't expect someone talking to me and I didn't recognize him. Still, looking closer, I thought, what a friendly man, offering his help as normally no one would do that. Oh, how stupid I was. While we were walking, he was telling me that he was from a big city. He was working with an NGO helping to educate girls from the rural areas. My eyes were glowing. My heart was beating faster as I thought of having the chance to being educated. In my mind, I already saw myself living in the city in a big building with my own bed in my own flat. It would be my own shelter, some sort of paradise. I was desperately hoping that he would choose me and take me to the city instead of one of my older sisters. He was telling me stories about girls he rescued, how their life turned out, and their outstanding achievements. The entire way back home, I was behaving the politest way I could, wanting him to be impressed by me. When we reached the last corner, I was already able to have a look at my home. I nearly couldn't hold back running to my father, telling him the most amazing news we had in years. Deeply, I was hoping that the man from the city would convince my father to take me with him. The more I thought about the opportunities I would have in the city, the more I wanted to go. If I got educated, I could earn good money and support my family like my uncle did. Maybe one day my family could join me. While I was thinking about the amazing life I could have, the man introduced himself to my father, who was still with the animals. After the man suggested to talk somewhere more privately, they went inside. I was so curious of the content of their conversation that I sneaked inside as closer to the door as possible. I was kneeling in front of the door, hearing parts of their conversation. Even though I tried to understand as much as possible, my ears hardly caught some parts. From my father's voice, I could hear excitement. The ambience was so stunned that I really had to focus hard to catch some words. All I heard was Delhi, tomorrow, unique opportunity, and a good money. After discussing for a while, the man and my father came out of the room. My father's face was glowing. He had tears in his eyes, and it seemed to me as if he looked relieved. At first I thought he was relieved because he was not losing me. He headed to me with big steps, hugged me, and whispered in my ears that he's happy for me, but will miss me. All my father ever wanted was to enable me a life that was better than his, so I wouldn't have to suffer in the village like him. I cried, not knowing whether it was because I was happy to start a new life or because I was sad that I would have to leave my family. Until the next day, when I carried my bag and said goodbye to my family, I didn't realize that this was really happening and I was leaving home. The first 3 days in Delhi was the best days of my life, but actually I was imprisoned in hell without realizing it. The man was taking care of me like my own father. He gave me food and let me stay in a nice room at his place. The next morning I woke up at a strange place. Until today I don't know how I got there. He must have drugged me somehow. All of a sudden my daily life changed. The friendly man who bought me had disappeared, and instead a different man stepped in the room I was in. The room was a dark place without a window. It had only a thin and dirty mattress on the floor. The blanket on the bed had patches and holes. I was freezing. I was scared. My mind was racing. What had happened to me? The man approached me. He hauled me on my feet, looking closely in my face. I could smell cold smoke. He made my flesh crawl. He demanded me being downstairs for practice immediately. I was confused. What practice? But I didn't even dare to ask a single question. His eyes were full of cruelty. I was paralyzed by fear, still going downstairs because I understood intuitively I had no other choice. As I reached downstairs, I realized I wasn't the only one. I was standing in a big warehouse. Next to me was a young boy my age on a trampoline, training spectacular somersaults. A girl with short hair trained with some hoops. Another girl was on a trapezium. One thing that they all had in common were their numb faces, showing no expressions at all. No one was talking and the atmosphere was tense. I was frozen and couldn't move until the man who came down the stairs behind me pushed me. He forced me to the corner of the room where I was isolated from the group. There he said that from now on I should train as a gymnast because, according to him, that's where I fit the best. I had no say. It took me a while to realize where I was. Later I found out that the friendly man who pretended to be my friend had sold me to a circus where I was supposed to train and become an acrobat. It was a circus with 15 members, of which 2/3 were children like me. The older ones were training us children. I tried to figure out their stories, but there was an unspoken rule that you don't talk about your past. Despite the rule, I kept asking questions. The more no one was answering, the more I could continue asking. I couldn't accept my faith. One time I brought up the courage to ask the circus director about the education that was promised to me, since the others weren't answering. It was my last chance to get some answers because we were not allowed to leave or communicate with the outside world. I was in my tiny room, waiting for my dinner to be brought. Once the circus director was entering my room, I nearly shouted out of my question to him. I couldn't stand any longer that I never got any information. His reaction was not what I expected. He rushed towards me, grabbed my shoulders tight, shook me, pushed me against the wall. His left hand was raising threateningly and slapped me brutally in my face, shouting at me not to ask any questions anymore. From this moment on, I became one of the circus children without expressions on their face. I just did what I was told to. My daily life was repetitive. There was no day without training. Every day training started at 6 in the morning, and there was no breakfast until the morning session was done. In general, there were no regular meal times, and the only food we got was often tea and dal roti. All the time we were afraid of making mistakes or getting injured. We were abused and beaten with twisted wires by the trainers for the slightest of mistakes. There was no time of the day when the trainers would leave us alone. Even when we were traveling for shows, we were never left alone. We were always guarded by the trainers. While traveling, we slept in tents on grass or mud. We had no electricity, no ventilation, no medical attention, and we were suffering under the poor quality of drinking water. The lacking safety made us an easy target for sexual harassment. If we attended all sessions and shows, we got 5 rupees a day. And if we missed any, we wouldn't get any money at all. From the 150 rupees we got per month, we could afford some clothes and toothbrush and basic necessities. Thinking back, all the years the suffering from the physical and mental abuse never stopped. The pictures keep coming to my mind whenever I close my eyes. The night of my rescue was blurred. I was stuck in my daily duties without recognizing that there must have been some kind of rescue preparation going on. They came one night. I hardly remember it because everyone, including myself, was asleep. They picked me up out of my bed and carried me outside to the car as silent as possible. I wasn't sure whether I was sold again. Even though it felt different, I've become so numb that I wasn't scared at all. I thought it could not get even worse. 2 other girls were rescued with me, and during the ride in the car, I was dozing on and off. When I was fully conscious again, the sun was already up and we were driving through the streets of an unknown city. Our first destination was Delhi. We were brought to a tiny shelter in some rural areas, and it seemed like we were hidden from the public to not draw any attention to us. The next night, as soon as it got dark, we were brought over the border to Nepal. It was a dawn raid. As we were driving for hours and hours, I felt the exhaustion of the past years. Even though I was still not sure about what was happening to me, I felt in a weird way safe. The other 2 girls who were rescued with me, they seemed to feel the same way. I don't really know how long we were sitting in the car. The driver was not talking to us. He just smiled at us from time to time as if he wanted us to feel comfortable. Finally, we arrived in Kathmandu, where we were brought to another shelter. Women and men were waiting for us, smiling at us, helping us out of the car. They offered us food, showed us our rooms, and offered us medical care. I was overwhelmed by so much kindness as I haven't felt so much of it in the past years. I stayed in this place for months, slowly recovering from what had happened to me. I tried to get in contact with my family, but years had gone by. I was a small child when I got trafficked, when I left my family, and now I'm all grown-up woman without education, suffering from trauma. I didn't know how to behave with my family, and they certainly felt the same way, rejecting me and stigmatizing me. I found a new family within Circus Kathmandu. They included me. There, I could make use of the skills I acquired during my time in the circus I was trafficked to. For the first time, I didn't feel like I was useless. I was part of a team, a family, an organization that saved more than 1,000 children so far. Luckily, I was one of them. Until today, I don't know how they found out that I was in that Indian circus, that I was so desperately needing their help. I got lucky. They rescued me. Me out of all people who were kept in that circus, that prison, that hell on earth. But there are other girls who are not that lucky. They're still living in this nightmare, unable to get out by themselves without help. Whenever I close my eyes, pictures keep coming in my mind. Dark ones, cruel ones, scaring ones. I just can't stop these horrible memories. It's getting bright outside. I'm lying in bed, still not able to sleep, and my mind is not resting.